Downing Street says the UK's evacuation from Afghanistan has ended tonight, bringing a close to 20 years of British military operations in the country. These were some of the last British troops to leave Kabul, following the final flight out for civilians fleeing the Taliban.
We've done an extraordinary job to evacuate as many as we have, but I'm afraid it's absolutely heartbreaking that we can't bring everybody out.
For those who could not be rescued, there is fear and tension in Kabul and warnings of another terror attack within the coming days. As crowds flock to festivals and beaches for the bank holiday weekend, concerns it could mean a rise in COVID cases. And the golden couple, husband and wife Neil and Laura Fahy, both win gold medals for Great Britain at the Paralympics. Hello, good evening. Downing Street says the UK's military evacuation from Afghanistan has ended tonight with the departure of the last British troops and diplomats from Kabul airport, bringing to a close 20 years of British military operations in the country. Well, it follows the final flight out earlier today for civilians fleeing the Taliban. The head of the UK Armed Forces said it is heartbreaking that British troops have not been able to rescue everybody. He said hundreds of eligible people have been left behind. Well, altogether, the US military says nearly 112,000 people have been airlifted from Kabul. Of those, more than 15,000 were flown out by British forces. But up to 1,100 Afghans and 150 UK nationals could not be rescued. Here's our diplomatic correspondent, Caroline Hawley.
Heading home, 1,000 British troops were sent into Kabul to get people out. US troops provided security for an unprecedented international rescue mission. The last British plane carrying civilians flew out of Kabul this morning. This evening, news that the last soldiers and diplomats have now left. In all, there were over 100 RAF evacuation flights, the end of a 20-year campaign that was not supposed to finish like this.
We've done an extraordinary job to evacuate as many as we have, but I'm afraid it's absolutely heartbreaking that we can't bring everybody out. And I think that point's been made very strongly, certainly by the Defence Secretary and others over the last 10 days or so. Personally, I've probably had over 100 messages from different Afghans who I know in my long association with the country. And many of those friends of mine won't make it out. And for me, not a day passes without me having a bit of a tear in my eye about all of that.
Day after day, British military personnel have been processing Afghans desperate to escape. Altogether, more than 15,000 people have been brought out by the RAF, British nationals and Afghans who'd worked with the UK, along with their families. But hundreds have not been able to reach the airport, Afghans whose lives are now at grave risk.
It's time to close this phase of the operation now. But we haven't forgotten the people who still need to leave. We'll continue to do everything we can to help them. Nor have we forgotten the brave, decent people of Afghanistan. They deserve to live in peace and security.
The government suggested that Afghans who are eligible to come to the UK make their way to third countries to be processed. But it could be impossibly dangerous trying to get through Taliban checkpoints. And other than calling for safe passage, there's nothing the UK can do to help from afar. At RAF Brize Norton this morning, British soldiers arriving back on UK soil. Over the past 20 years, more than 100,000 British troops served in Afghanistan. 457 British lives were lost. The mission began by ousting the Taliban from power. It ends with a rush to a timetable dictated by the militants. Britain's military personnel have done their job, but this is a bitter homecoming. Caroline Hawley, BBC News.
And our political correspondent Ian Watson is in Downing Street for us tonight. Ian, a moment of history really, because this isn't just the end of the British airlift from Kabul, it's the end of British military operations in Afghanistan.
That's right, Ben. It was confirmed to me in the last few minutes that the last UK flight carrying military and diplomatic personnel has taken off from Kabul airport. And as you say, it is a historical moment. It's the end of a 2 decades-long struggle in Afghanistan. It was back in November 2001, in the wake of 9/11, that the first UK ground troops entered Afghanistan, initially successfully, but then, of course, the whole campaign became incredibly protracted and cost 457 lives of UK service personnel. Now, tonight, the Prime Minister says this is a moment to reflect on the sacrifices that our armed forces have made, and he said he will now continue by diplomatic rather than military means to ensure that some of the gains of the past 20 years and women's education, in, for example, the extension of human rights, that these aren't rolled back by the new Taliban rulers. And he also have a message to the armed forces that their involvement has protected this country, has stopped any major terrorist attacks being organised and plotted from Afghanistan and carried out in the West. So the sacrifices have not been in vain. But I think, yes, there will be time for reflection, but right now a lot of the focus is on what happens to those who've been left behind. Perhaps around 10,000 Afghan citizens have come out to the UK, but many who have helped UK forces, hundreds of them, are still in Afghanistan and fearful for their future.
And in terms of the evacuation, real regret from both politicians and military commanders that they couldn't get everybody out.
There's been a lot of political criticism about the manner of our exit from Afghanistan, Ben, I think it's fair to say, including some former Conservative MPs who were former military personnel themselves. One of them talked about his anger and shame at leaving people behind. The Chief of the Defence Staff, Nick Carter, today said he had a tear in his eye because some of his friends are still in Afghanistan and haven't been able to be evacuated. And questions remain about how these hundreds of people will get out. Will new processing hubs be set up in neighbouring countries to help them out? And as far as I'm aware tonight, Ben, there have been no negotiations with the Taliban to ensure safe passage. This is something which the Prime Minister says is his priority, but safe passage for those left behind tonight simply does not exist.
Ian, thank you very much. Ian Watson, our political correspondent. Well, the US operation is due to end in Afghanistan by Tuesday, and tonight President Biden has said that another terror attack at Kabul airport is highly likely in the next 24 to 36 hours. Around 170 people were killed on Thursday in a suicide bomb attack carried out by the Islamic State group. Our correspondent Secunda Kamani reports now from Kabul, where fear and tension remain.
Outside Kabul airport, warning shots ring out. Since Thursday's awful suicide bombing by the local branch of the Islamic State group, the crowds here have grown smaller, but some still remain. Tens of thousands have been evacuated, these Afghans escorted by the Taliban. Others, however, are being left behind. Like this pizza shop owner from Essex. He'd travelled to Kabul to help try and take his Afghan national wife and young children home.
I got receipt email yesterday, and they said stay away from the airport and stay in safe place. From today I was keep calling and sending email, even nobody answered.
The IS attack on the airport has left many fearing there could be further bloodshed. The United States announced it killed 2 key IS operatives in a drone strike in the east of the country. Back in Kabul, the streets are quieter than usual. Many are struggling to cope financially, with banks closed for nearly 2 weeks now. This is one of a handful of cash machines still working.
We're not begging Aziz Bank staff to give us money. This is our own money to get it, but we have family, we have children. If we don't have money, how should we prepare bread for my family?
When I see what has become of the country, I feel it's impossible to live here. Everything is becoming more expensive. I feel like I'm suffocating.
The Taliban swept into Kabul unexpectedly easily, but governing this city and the rest of the country is likely to be a far bigger challenge. The group says it will take time for life to stabilise. One of the few businesses not complaining, this Taliban member selling flags. Others are still anxiously waiting to see what life under their rule will look like. Sikandar Kamani, BBC News, Kabul.
Other news now, and let's take a look at the latest coronavirus figures from the government, and they show there were 32,406 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means on average there were 34,226 new cases per day in the last week. Well, 133 deaths were recorded in the last 24 hours, with an average of 112 deaths a day in the last week. On vaccinations, 88.2% of adults in the UK have now had their first jab, and 78.2% have now had both doses. Well, as large crowds flock to beaches and festivals today for the bank holiday weekend, there are concerns about rising COVID infection rates. Public health officials in some areas are calling on holidaymakers to take lateral flow tests before travelling. Philip Norton reports now from Scarborough.
Ice creams and sandcastles, with a strong message of hands, face, space and take a test. The temperature was well into the 20s in Scarborough today, the first bank holiday weekend in England since coronavirus restrictions were lifted.
Got one vaccination, you're doubled, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm double vaccinated as well, yeah.
We'll take all the precautions that we can, and we know that sun's good for everybody, so it's nice to be out and about.
We've missed, well, for the last 18 months. 18 months, you know, it's a long time, you know, so yeah, we have missed it, but, you know, we're loving it now, so that's what counts.
Like many areas, North Yorkshire Council has asked visitors to take a lateral flow test before coming to resorts, and if they found they were busy, to consider going elsewhere. But in the southwest of England, that message has been taken even further. Infection rates in Devon and Cornwall have spiked, and with a number of festivals taking place and a busy holiday season, extra government support and testing is being provided from Monday. Elsewhere, thousands of music fans are enjoying the Reading and Leeds festivals, where there's also a chance to grab a jab.
We want to take every opportunity to get as many people vaccinated as possible. Especially at the moment, we're targeting the younger age group, and where better than to come to a place like this, where the majority of the population is under 20, under 30.
Festival fun and busy beaches. Health officials are hoping the stay safe message has been taken on board. Philip Norton, BBC News, Scarborough.
Right, time for a look at all the day's sports news now. Here's Ollie Foster at the BBC Sports Centre. Evening, Ollie.
Many thanks to you, Ben. Great Britain have had their best day yet at the Paralympic Games, with 7 golds to hold on to second place in the medal table. Our correspondent Andy Swiss is in Tokyo.
The story, what a ride!
A case of same surname, same outcome. For the couple who are both visually impaired, a remarkable feat.
She told me she was crying, and I had to admit that I was too. But yeah, I mean, we sort of planned for this, but you never really expect it all comes together like that.
And the gold rush continued. Jacco Van Gas, Jodie Cundy and Kadina Cox in the mixed team sprint. They were trailing China, but somehow Cundy turned it round.
Can he claw it back? Oh, yes, he can! Oh, it's unbelievable!
Well, it's been some games for Britain's track cyclists. They've won 6 gold medals in total. And tonight, over at the Athletic Stadium, others were following their example. In the 100 metres, a new star was born. 21-year-old Thomas Young winning gold on his Paralympic debut. There was also gold in the women's 100. Sophie Hahn once again showing her brilliance on the biggest stage. In the pool, there was gold for the mixed relay team and another for Maisie Summers-Newton, just 19, but already a double Paralympic champion. But the celebration of the day belonged to Will Bailey, the former Strictly competitor showing some less than fancy footwork. But he's into the table tennis final. Just imagine what he'll do if he wins it. Andy Swiss, BBC News, Tokyo.
22 goals are coming up on Match the Day after the news. If you'd like to know the results, though, stay right there. Liverpool and Chelsea were both looking to continue their winning start to the season, but it finished 1-1 at Anfield. Chelsea played half the game with 10 men. There were also draws at Aston Villa, Newcastle and West Ham. Manchester City thrashed 10-man Arsenal 5-0, their biggest win over the Gunners, who are now bottom of the table. Everton and Leicester also won today. Hibs and Hearts are still level on points at the top of the Scottish Premiership. Both won today, as did Motherwell. It's the Old Firm match tomorrow. England's cricketers beat India by an innings and 76 runs at Headingley to level their Test series. It's now 1-1 with 2 matches left to play. Adam Wilde reports.
In Leeds, they came ready for a carnival. What they got, in fact, was a procession. History tells us to expect the unexpected at Headingley, England here, springing the surprises. Cheteshwar Pujara didn't seem to see that coming. Holly Robinson and England up and running. Pujara gone for 91, but the big prize was that of Virat Kohli. He'd passed 50, but couldn't get past the waiting hands of Joe Root. Robinson wreaking havoc, so too England's more established names. This was Jimmy Anderson undoing Ajinkya Rahane. Moeen Ali offering a quick break from the quick bowling, no less deadly. But the morning belonged to Robinson. This saw off Ishant Sharma, his 5th wicket. Craig Overton delivering the knockout blows. Headingley had expected a day of drama. What it got was a morning masterclass. Adam Wilde, BBC News.
This is BBC News.
Formula One's back from its summer break. Max Verstappen's going to be on pole for tomorrow's Belgian Grand Prix, with Championship leader Lewis Hamilton 3rd on the grid. Qualifying conditions at Spa were treacherous. Lando Norris lost control of his McLaren. The British driver escaped serious injury, but he was taken to hospital for a precautionary X-ray. Much more on that on the BBC Sport website, and also highlights from the Mountain Bike World Championships, where Great Britain's Evie Richards has won gold. Ben.
Ollie, thank you very much indeed, and that's all from me. Have a very good night.